industry. Uh, how do we place it in the film history of Tamil cinema? So I'll begin from there. And second thing is about certain aesthetic concerns about NASIR. No? First one is more of a historical kind of a remark. Uh, in a sense, there has been this idea of independent cinema across. I mean, Likina knows she had a whole retrospective you conducted in the EFLU, right? There has been these independent filmmakers, various languages. We had in Malayalam, Bengali, Kannada. So generally, there has been this idea that 70s and 80s, we had a whole lot of independent filmmakers. Apparently, they talk about issues which are not discussed or which are not part of the concern of the mainstream cinema. So, in a way, that in a very interesting way, Tamil never had this uh, moment. Tamil cinema, there was no. I think I should use my microphone. Right. Tamil cinema never had such a remarkable kind of period where you have so many independent filmmakers talking about social issues or anything. Something like Kasaravalli in Kannada or other filmmakers in Malayalam, Bengali. There is something curious kind of absence in Tamil which people talk about it, except for a few movies by this Venkat Swaminathan or somebody. No, what is his name? Komal Swaminathan. So I was thinking about this dual absence. The one is the absence of this particular independent uh, trend of films. So in the first absence, this is the absence of this independent cinema. The explanation often given by various scholars is that in the 70s and the 80s, there is a whole lot of, you know, the mainstream cinema which picked up issues otherwise which are generally picked up by the independent filmmakers in other languages. So, you can say that the films Bharati Raja or Magendran, quite a fascinating films talking about social issues in a very profound and in a very beautiful way. So somehow there was no such condition for a independent film to emerge, which is going to talk about issues which are not there in the mainstream cinema or also. So that's a kind of interesting kind of a backdrop, absence of particular aesthetic, in Tamil cinema. So in a way that both in terms of the thematic concerns of independent cinema otherwise engages, and also a certain kind of realistic aesthetic, uh, which is largely associated with some of the independent cinema, somehow kind of seeped into the mainstream cinema in the 70s and 80s. You can say that's the one absence of this particular aesthetic, right? Uh, in a way, today we are witnessing that. Nikhila is part of a group. Often we talk about this. That this today there is a difficulty in talking about uh, independent cinema in a sense. Much of the aesthetic changes are taking place not in a parallel level, but actually in the mainstream cinema itself. Many of these industries, whether it is Tamil or Kannada, Malayalam, or Bengali, Marathi, so there even in Hindi to some extent that there is a whole lot of changes which are largely conditioned by uh, infrastructural kind of changes or change in the social taste of cinema and aesthetic, or change in terms of narrative. So some kind of realism. So there is a whole lot of conditions which create this change in the cinematic aesthetic. People consider this as it's a new wave cinema, second new wave or whatever. So interestingly, that kind of uh, uh, reminds you of what happened in the 80s and 70s. It is not that the cinema is coming as a parallel to the mainstream cinema, but this particular aesthetic is actually snatching some kind of a space within the mainstream cinema. So mainstream cinema itself is actually kind of getting transformed with a new aesthetic. That's what is happening. So having said that, what is the second absence which I want to talk about it? The second absence is that irrespective of those changes since 70s and 80s, and the changes which are kind of coincided with uh, the new kind of conditions, which are no 2000s, late 90s, and the past 2 decades or 3 decades. Despite all those changes, there has been, I mean, I can say that there has been a conspicuous absence of any, you know, a substantial presentation of Tamil Muslim life or a Tamil Muslim figure or any character, except for some, very cheap, stereotypical account of some Muslim with a skull cap, some very faithful, trustable Muslim, or some uncle. Those kind of, the very stereotypical thing. There are no, I cannot recall any substantial stories which actually are, uh, part of the cinematic space. So the Nasir, the film which all of you have watched, in a sense, uh, in a sense, uh, is a kind of making Nasir perhaps is in a sense is a quite a challenge in a sense uh, to present something new, uh, present something very different. Uh, in a sense that uh, what a parallel cinema or independent cinema is supposed to perform. Otherwise, that talk about issues which are left out. Uh, Nasir seems to pick up this theme as an independent cinema. Nowadays, there has been quite a few independent films made by Tamil directors, and some time back, somebody made a presentation in my department about a film made by Swarnavel Iswaran, who was invited by Nikhila to speak to AFLU. A kind of a film which talks about queer relationship, uh, kind of bonding between two women. Is an independent cinema. So it seems to be the independent cinema seem to today in Tamil. However, the less the number, they seem to pick up themes which haven't been formed fully into uh, the mainstream cinema. Like some of the films by Leena Manimagalai or Swarnavel or this particular director. Uh, so somehow things which are not discussed, despite there is a whole lot of aesthetic revolution in Tamil cinema. So that's how I thought I would present this. Uh, the context of the film, and interestingly, in an ironical way, this absence of Muslim lives and characters, families, uh, Muslim every day is perhaps is simultaneous with whole lot of uh, beautiful literature which is available in Tamil. Uh, there is a whole lot of literature talks about Muslim livelihoods, life worlds, etc. Uh, I mean, for example, the Salma's writings, Kirnur Jagir Raja, or some of the poems of Rasul. So quite interesting, rich literary scape. You can find all these lives, which find no place in you know uh, Tamil mainstream cinema today. Interestingly, the independent cinema is also associated with uh, working along with literature. Literary texts are often adapted and taken into made into film, etc. This has been one of the features of even the 70s and 80s independent cinema. So Nasir, interesting way, is also an adaptation of a short story by this Tamil writer Dilip Kumar. Uh, it's called a Kumasthavin Kadai, a story of a Kumasta. I wouldn't get a copy of the text to read in Tamil, planning to read. So in a way that the independent cinema seem to perform uh, this function here. Having said about this, the context of the film, I thought I'll come to the film text of the film. I hope all of you have seen the film. Uh, this the challenge for a filmmaker would be to so in a sense it's a kind of a paradoxical kind of situation. On the one hand, there are no substantial presentation of Muslim characters or complex life situations or anything like that. On the other hand, there is a proliferation of uh, kind of you know uh, a particular kind of aesthetic, a very cheap kind of aesthetics about Muslims, uh, both in terms of visual presentation and also some kind of a soundscapes. Uh, kind of proliferation of this kind with a whole lot of stories about terrorism, bombs and attack, all kind of things. So uh, in a way, it becomes difficult to talk about a Muslim. So that I think that's a challenge which the film Nazir tries to engage with. What is a language in which uh, particularly the visual language, what is the language it is going to uh, adapt? How is going to, that's a challenge I think the film takes up. You can see from the beginning to the end the struggle and uh, set in a, there's a kind of uh, both, uh, both it's ordinary in a mundane, boring, monotonous, repeating every day. On the other hand, there is a uh, kind of the love for life and poetry and you know uh, love for his wife. There is something that is which is uh, which is also part of the ordinary, right? In a sense, part of the ordinary. Then there is this kind of the ordinary is you know fueled with the newly emerging hatred and you know hatred and unpleasant kind of situations filled within this ordinary life, and it ends with some kind of extraordinary kind of a situation, right? So in a sense, I would talk about two. Uh, I mean, all of you watched. I don't want to tell a story or what about this movie. Certain kind of what I'm trying to say, I would explain with couple of scenes from the film. The first one is the opening shot, and the second one is the climax shot. When we think about the opening shot, uh, I think this azan playing in the morning, uh, this mosque prayer. Hundreds of movies have shown this. Uh, uh, it's a kind of a there is a difficulty in replaying it in a film. One can actually recall that. I mean, please interrupt if you have anybody want to speak, uh, comment, add something. Uh, Please feel free to all of you interrupt and say things in the middle. So we have seen in many films. Very often, this music is shown against, some of these terrorist films and all that. This music you can hear it on the backdrop of some kind of conspiracy or some plotting activity, etc., etc. So that has been some kind of a meaning has been attributed to this. So in a way, it's a very challenge to reproduce uh, this particular soundscape. At the same time, uh, kind of subvert it. So you see Nasir sleeping in his house while this music is playing. So the most innocent activity any human being can do, the sleeping, you know, sleeping, turning back and sleeping in the early morning. So it's a kind of presented in that way. So while this is kind of this particular uh, instance can be, some kind of responding to that. On the other hand, it falls into another kind of uh, discourse that is about presenting Nasir as someone who doesn't pay much of attention to the 5 times prayers practice of a Muslim. And the Muslims are supposed to run fast and go and pray in the morning, and he is someone who's does a prayer only in the afternoon, shown in the afternoon, but he's not somebody who's like very particular about 5 times prayer and all that. So it again falls into the whole lot of discursive domain of uh, what kind of a Muslim he is. So in a way, it's a kind of challenge for a film to kind of traverse this challenge at each and every step, right? So this is the one point. I'll conclude by saying one more point about the film. This is about at various moments this particular kind of realism at work in this film. Uh, it is true that this is mundane. Uh, it is in a way presents the uh, ordinary of the everyday life, uh, mundane, repetitive, slow, and you know this particular thing is presented with a particular realistic aesthetics. Like if someone cuts an onion, the shot is still there till he cuts the last piece of onion, like that. So sometimes you get particularly the last shot. Some you tend to check whether it is film is playing or it is paused. It's a kind of a long shot, right? The Nasir is fallen on the street after mobs attack him, right? So in a sense, this particular aesthetic, uh, it is uh, it is in a way that both some kind of uh, very patient kind of a approach, and also it invokes certain kind of impatience in the spectator. That is uh, that is in a sense the impatience with the present which is ugly and you know unpleasant present. So I think that the film does it in a very interesting way by uh, by putting pressure on the spectator to 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 be impatient about uh, passing this moment of unpleasant. In a sense, you want to, you know, let these days pass. We want to move ahead, like, or in a way that you want to pass from this present, which is not fine. So the context of this rise of particular kind of political interests, and so that's how I read this particular realistic aesthetics, and we can further discuss with our friends. Uh, yeah, coming back to one of our friends was raising the uh, Fruitville Station, the film by is about this Afro-American man shot, killed, and it's a kind of cycle of one whole day of his life. Uh, Somehow it is a kind of in terms of narrative, narrative, somehow he runs like that, though it is not a you know based on some real life instance or something. And there are a whole lot of other, I mean, you are reminded of uh, other movies, even some mainstream Hindi movies, tackle this issue of, you know, the creeping hatred and Islamophobic kind of things encroaching upon their everyday life. You yeah, please, no. Nikhila, just can I conclude here and further we can discuss?
Um, if I might speak, um, I'm Usha. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm not talking directly about the film, but the first point that you made about mainstream and uh, alternate cinema in Tamil, I didn't
Yeah.
quite get your point. Can you
Uh,
illustrate?
See, in the 70s and the 80s, across various industries in India,
Mm.
there has been a whole lot of uh, new film aesthetic, largely, made by
New
independent
wave.
filmmakers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
and
But
also many of them are
but don't,
supported by uh, state, also kind of funded. So a whole
mm,
lot of films which talk about issues of social concern, and uh,
but
so there was
but
no
don't
such.
you
Yeah, please.
But don't you think it was kind of integrated into the Tamil cinema? I mean, whether it was MGR or Karnanidhi or somebody, it seems to have been integrated into mainstream. No? These ideas of social issues. What do you think?
Yeah.
So
That's, I mean,
maybe that did not necessitate a new wave.
exactly. That's the kind of arguments people,
Okay.
the scholars
Okay.
suggest. There is no
Mm,
such, need for that kind of films to emerge,
mm,
because from the beginning, Tamil cinema, you can say that from 50s onwards,
mm,
the rise of Dravidian movements, and
mm, mm,
you have 52 in Parasakti is 1952
mm,
talking about,
mm, mm,
Brahmanism and all that. So,
mm.
in a way, that specific history of Tamil cinema uh, did not require a kind of trend like independent film,
Mm,
which is present in other places, right?
mm.
That's the uh,
No, but how, in your opinion, how does this film stand out from the mainstream film?
his world, people, etc. So I think that that part, the film, I'm not very convinced about that part. There are, I can cite, many interesting films. For instance, if you watch a film like the episode in one section of the film in Mumbai Mary John, which I recently watched after this, this the great actor. He passed away. I was watching all his movies, Irfan. So Mumbai Mary John has that kind of uh, playing around with the audience. If you watch the film, the character. So in a way that when you watch these problematic characters, when they watch the film, in the opening of the film, you have this character absolutely, with Islamophobic, all the time suspecting that every Muslim is a terrorist kind of thing, paranoia character. And through the when the narrative kind of moves, it also moves the audience along, spectators along. How you get to identify with this man to realize that there are very many movies deal with that kind of a thing, but somehow on that count, Nasir is not making any progress. That's what I felt. That's what
Yeah.
Rashmi's
If I may add to that.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So, I mean, the curiosity part of this is like, how are we going to reach those groups? And also, what I know for fact is a lot of amateur videos are being made, very incendiary videos often, which provoke people to take violent action against a particular religious group, or it's like, how do films such as Nasir pan out against those videos, which also do rounds on people? I mean, in people's groups, and because it's almost like, I mean, I see two kinds of videos here. One is, of course, the feature film kind of a video. The other is, for example, recently I saw in response to the COVID thing, actually, with Tablighi and all those things happening. People were kind of inciting violence, and they were actually asking others to boycott. I mean, I have a video somewhere on my phone, which, so it's almost like there are those strong messages which ignite passions and provoke people to do something so inhumane, and you have another group here which is really trying to kind of send in the rational message. I know it's like it takes a lot more effort on part of the audience to get the reason than the passion. So it's about, I mean, how can we juxtapose these two things that will do circulations and still, I mean, what happens to the message finally is the question.
Yeah.
If it's going to stay with film clubs and film festivals versus the popular circulatory channels that we have, that's the question that I have.
Yeah. I think I just noticed before Balu muted himself again, looked like he also wanted to ask a question. Balu, VL, can you come in? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Yeah. I thought you wanted to ask a question. I just saw you.
No, you continue. I'll ask later.
Okay. Sure,
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Parthasarathi, do you want to respond to Rashmi's second question, or we want to look at other responses too?
I was thinking that
others?
I was thinking the very fact that this particular theme hasn't prominently come about in a mainstream cinema, whereas it could come only as some independent film, which has I mean, I also kind of strikingly, a lot of audience. I was also watching when the release of the film on YouTube. So like by the time I completed the film, it was around 80,000 people or something like 8,000. So it's a good viewership comparing with other films. I mean, the very fact that this is finding a place in this parallel independent kind of film itself shows that that a lack of address of this issue to the larger audience. But however, in the field of discursive combat, on the one hand there are all kind of videos. So I think NASIR will play. It's not some kind of, it cannot transform the entire situation, but it will play a bit of role in terms of combating some of these ideas of Islamophobia and hate and etc. It has its own message, and it can work at the level of discursive sites. So that's how we can see that it may not be able to combat whole. Yeah. It can generate a lot of discussions, like we are watching and discussing. It can take it to another. It can in fact inspire some mainstream films in Tamil. It's possible. So in that way, it can work at various registers.
Yeah. Anyone else? Sir, Professor Paniraj, sir?
Yeah. I want to discuss this thing with Rashmi. It is very peculiar that she posed that question, because I thought the whole film is to common audience. I mean, because I have been chronicling violence in west coast of Karnataka, communal violence, and I have been seeing that this is such a kind of film which talks about the victims as they are, and Rashmi should understand that the people who perpetrate this violence know these people, that they are commons, they are living among ourselves, and we are co-living, but still the violence happens. The film poses a very important question about othering. That means the people who live coexist, a co-living is happening with us, and on a day-to-day basis it's happening. But why violence all of a sudden disrupts, and who is othering us? Right. This I thought when I saw NASIR, then Nandita Das's Firak, which takes a position, right, ideological position, as Rashmi said that it divides, but NASIR doesn't divide us. NASIR says that, okay, he is on a day-to-day basis and a banality, he is living with us, and why violence is perpetrated on him or in his community. So that's I thought that this film is supposed to be watched by all, even by the Hindutva groups, who should ask themselves a question: why we are committing or perpetrating a violence on a community which is co-living with us. I will tell you an interesting anecdote about this. I work in an engineering institute, and most of my, say it's a misnomer, say my colleagues favor Hindutva groups. They say that if Hindutva groups were not to be there, then we would have been at risk. I'll ask them the simple question: you look around the Muslims who live around you. How are they? They say they're very good. You interact with them? Yeah, we interact with them. But still, why violence on them? There's no answer to it. That means there's a larger politics, Hindutva politics, which is happening to othering them at a psychological level. This film poses that question to the audience, that search for othering. Who is operating on your side to other with the people who coexist with you? I thought Rashmi should also ponder on this, because I thought this is the film which everybody should watch and at a larger audience should watch.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I think Rashmi might have a disagreement with you, but she is basically saying that these independent films do not have the reach like the mainstream cinema. I mean, we will be happy to have so many people watching this film, but unfortunately, the cinemas, these particular films, they have a very limited spectator, and is shown in some film clubs, other places, and they are not like Rajinikanth film or any. So they are not even like any small actor films which has a larger reach. I think Rashmi is pointing to that kind of situation. Yeah.
No, there's always that break-even point. There's always that break-even point. How do you reach larger masses? I mean, that's the question each independent filmmaker or even an activist should face, right? An activist who is working for a communal harmony, the activist who is working for, say, Dalit group should reach that break-even point, how to talk to the people who perpetrate. Okay, that's a society what we are living in. It's not just an isolated case of this film, right? Film being an art, either independent film or a mainstream film. It's not a point. Point is not what is that Salman Khan film, Bajrangi? What is that? Okay.
Bajrangi
How it
Bhaijaan.
communicates. It's not the point how it communicates. Point is what it communicates. Point is talking to the psyche of the people, right? Like as Basavanna said, Antaranga, you should touch inner one. So this film tries to touch the inner one. You got to reach some break-even point. How do you, being an independent filmmaker, how do you meet the larger audience? That is the politics of filmmaking as a whole, making and showing. That's where film society group should act as a what you call a cooperative of the showing that we should take, and of course filmmakers should join with this, and we should take it forward. There is a break-even point where we meet the popular film, where independent films meet the popular film. Break-even point, which is the break-even point. So we should not avoid that break-even point. We should try to reach that break-even point. Of course, NASIR has been shown in Rotterdam and got its popularity. That's why we are seeing it here, isn't it? Otherwise, we are not have seen it. As some kind of Tamil film which was shown in some Mami, I can't go to Mami, I can't watch it. Right? What it makes in Rotterdam. So that kind of thing, the film society, I mean, larger activism also should participate in this, because I am also an activist, I am also a film buff, and I am a film critic. Where is that break-even point where we reach that common audience? That is a point to work, not to complain.
Yeah. Rashmi, we'll come back to you. Geeta has unmuted herself. We'll just go to Geeta and then come back to Rashmi.
Okay. Yeah, can I come?
Yeah, Geeta, go ahead.
Yeah. My location in Gujarat, gives me a very visceral kind of response to NASIR, and especially the last scene, where you see those mobs. In 2002, there was an almost identical kind of mob that ran past right outside my house, running towards a laundry which was owned by a Muslim man. And within a few minutes, we saw a blazing fire. So, so at a very personal level, my response to the film, I just wanted to convey was, an almost visceral kind of a response, bringing back those horrifying memories. But apart from that, I think the film is technically brilliant, and the whole tone of the film, is it kind of combines both, like as Parthasarathi has already mentioned, the banal and the quotidian routine of NASIR with really terrifying end. So you even have humor, like that man who's rattling off what where to buy the best dosas and idlis, and he's talking about all that, or even that sari shop and the lives of all the salesmen there, and then the gossip that happens. So I think the narrative that way is really very, very beautifully constructed, and even cinematically, those certain shots which just freeze on a particular scene, forcing the viewer to actually enter into that character, and there are a number of scenes which have extreme close-ups as well. So it's kind of forcing us to observe and to see and to enter into the narrative. So I think these things were very, very fascinating for me. And also the opening shot, with that beautiful chiaroscuro, that light and shade of the sun coming in, and then those window bars, form that reflection on Nasir's face as he's sleeping. And then there, he's sleeping, and then in the end, also you have that, the camera freezing on that, on the dead Nasir for a long time, almost making the viewer contemplate on, the shock of what has happened, and also the whole, the unreasonableness of it all, like why this person, like, what is the reason behind this undead case? So it kind of begins with sleep and ends also with a sleep, which unfortunately, of course, the kind of sleep that one doesn't. So I think the whole narrative is framed by sleep, the metaphor of sleep, which I think was very interesting for me. So I think these are just some random observations. I'm not, like a film historian, so I will not be able to kind of contextualize it in the larger history of Tamil cinema, but as a more emotional viewer of cinema, I think this is what I wanted to say about my responses to Nasir.
Parthasarathi, anything to say? Rashmi has raised her hand. Yeah.
I was also thinking that the point which she has raised, a very interesting way of reading each shots and all that. Nicely she put it, nothing much to say. Going back to the Vaniraj sir about, so I somehow felt that this director or Nasir, the confrontation with or encounter with the right wing is not brought out nicely, in the film. That there is the only encounter is this mob coming and killing. Otherwise, it's not an encounter, but you could hear only overhear somebody speaking over phone or someone talking about Muslim. There is no, confrontation with the figure of this whatever, what people call it in the internet, Bhakt or the right-wing activist.
Yeah.
In a way that the film is not successful in that line of, to engaging with this particular psyche that which Vaniraj sir was nicely presented. Today, when this guy with this kind of a prejudice watches the film, you cannot expect him to be having a pity on this Nasir. He already has a completely prejudiced mind and about opinion about Muslims and all that, and he is quite happy about getting people killed, etc. So how are you going to engage with this man? How are you going to confront him? So that's what I was mentioning. This Mumbai Marriage on film has a lot of those kind of scenes in the film. This right-wing character is confronted by this various situations, and I mean, it's not film is not so convincing in a sense. Mumbai Marriage on that it transforms easily and all that, but it's a kind of the film has to engage with this problem. Somehow the Nasir doesn't do that.
Okay.
That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, Rashmi and then Kavya.
Kavya may want to speak because it's an old question and I would want to return to that. And if she has something, so let her speak first.
Kavya?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is not a question. What I found very interesting is that the atmosphere of hatred in which we are living is included in the film through sound actually. So more, not only visuals, actually the sound in the background plays an important role in this film. Many things are included just through sounds. And another thing I felt is like as Geeta Vishwanath was pointing out, some visuals are actually really very fascinating. The first scene of that shadows, but all through the film, I think many a times it uses medium shot, but at times when it uses close up, it actually helps us to get into the character, and the final climax shot is a long shot. Otherwise, it is always in the medium shot. Um, Another thing which I don't know how it goes with the film is the scene of the boy to whom he delivers the lunch, then the boys in the hostel. Uh, so their lifestyle is contrasted with that of Nasir. Nasir's lifestyle, which I think is not gelling very well with the what the film is largely trying to say. Just a few observations.
Okay. Grishma raised a hand too. Grishma,
Hi. Hello.
go ahead.
Adding on to the comments regarding the shots and also Parthasar's question as to Nasir. Even I was thinking about it in the sense.
Is it audio is not clear or something?
Grishma, your audio is not very clear.
Nasir is a very strange or hello.
Hello, Grishma, your audio is not very clear. There's an echo.
Am I audible now?
Yeah,
Hello?
this
Yeah,
is
yeah,
better.
please.
So regarding the question of what kind of a Muslim he is, what kind of a Muslim is that?
There's still an echo, Grishma.
Maybe she can use the chat and write it down quickly.
I was also wondering, in the sense, this is a very
Grishma, maybe you can use chat and write down your point. We are not able to hear you. Grishma?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Rashmi, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Hello.
Yeah, Grishma? Yeah.
Can I speak now?
Yeah.
Yeah, the point that I was making was not so much about the content, because much of the film discussions that we've had revolves around the content and what is happening within the story. I was just, veering the discussion to the modes of distributing this. For example, that this was a YouTube premiere, and probably the first time that it appeared in, the Indian scene. Unlike where it was in Miami or so. I was just curious to how it pans out there versus the kind of vehement circulation that Hindutva groups have. And I was just kind of veering the discussion away from the content of the film and the message that it conveys to the way in which, why is this important, is because it's like this is a race. It's about in the discursive space, it is about how many people are you going to reach, and of course there is also social prejudice here. So I'm not contesting the message of the film or what it's trying to say. I'm merely pointing out to the ways in which this is circulated and how this impacts the message itself. It's like in terms of how it goes and reaches out to people whom it should reach out to. So that was the question basically. Yeah.
Anyone else? Tarakeshwar, would you like to come in?
Okay. There are 2-3 issues that have come up for discussion here. Am I audible? Okay, quickly, I will finish my point. One is the larger issue of whether the films will have any impact on the audience or not, and if they have the impact, and what should be the impact. Is it possible to control that impact from the maker's end? I will not get into that. And the second issue is particular to this particular movie. The question, I think, is also about whether this is a political movie. Some would say yes, and Parthasarathi would say it doesn't confront or encounter the right wing. But rightly, as Kavya pointed out, I was also watching the interaction with the crew member of the film, where they speak about the soundscape. I think they've given more importance to encountering the right wing through the soundscape rather than with the visual scape. Visual indicators are there here and there, but by and large, the sound plays a major role here. Uh, when he is taking his wife to the bus stand, I think both the right wing discourse and the left wing discourse are beamed in the background in terms of the sound. So, in that sense, there is an encounter, but this film, from the point of view of the makers, is not so political. It wants to give a subtle message. That's why instead of visual, it takes the route of the soundscape. But I could easily detect the uh, ending in the beginning itself. So I could anticipate the ending. In that sense, there's nothing new in terms of the content. I watched several movies, and also the existing atmosphere indicates to me what is going to happen. And the very fact that it is set in Coimbatore, which is one of the odd beds of right wing in Tamil Nadu. Otherwise, Tamil Nadu, the right wing discourse is very less. But it is set in Coimbatore itself told me that it is going to end like this. So, in that sense, I could predict it. So though they have tried to say it subtly, but the even what has been said subtly is getting conveyed to everyone. So in that sense, it is political. Whether others will watch it or not, that is a different issue. So if we are discussing about how to counter the right wing discourse, then we can go on discussing about it. If we are discussing NASIR, I think for the time being, we will not get into that larger question of how to counter the right wing discourse and the compete with it in terms of the race. First stop here.
Yeah, Grishma has made this point in the chat. I think all of us can see about the close-up shots. Actually, again, in the interviews that came up with the crew, they point out something very interesting, which is that the film is shot in this 4:3 aspect ratio. Now, this 4:3 aspect ratio was a ratio that was used, I think, in silent cinema and then thereafter with television. So, generally now we use widescreen aspect ratio, whereas this was used precisely to give this kind of boxed and intimate effect that we are looking in onto the character, not othering the character, as she rightly points out. So we are entering into the space of the character so that this distance, so-called distance, so they call it as a second person empathetic perspective. That is, the film crew call it a second person empathetic perspective. So I think that was what Grishma was also pointing to. Parthasarathi, would you want to respond to Tarakeshwar's points?
Tarakeshwar's point, I don't have any response to that. I mean,
Okay.
the point is, it works with the sound is interesting. That is true. From the beginning, there is a lot of, overhearing this sound. Which Kavya raised about this going to the school and getting the tiffin box, giving an. There is another aspect of the film that's about. This is part of the this coexistence logic of thinking about Muslims and Hindus. This boy calls him Mama, and he goes to their house and picks up. So in a way, on the one hand, it is like Kavya was saying, it's a contrasting of social privilege or class or whatever. On the other hand, it is also about a relationship of a particular kind of affective relationship between these communities. That's what the film also opening that he also cleans up this Hindu god and puts a garland as a mundane duty. So
Can
I
I?
think the film also works at that level.
Communal violence, a political act in the end. So this kind of I was also wondering why a Muslim like that. I mean, that was a very interesting. mm, uh, I mean, I found this very interesting about the film. Also, like the whole film, I thought the maker wanted us to pay attention to a lot of beauties in the frame. Like the film was very un-Indian to me from the first watch. I thought chaos is part of our lives. Noise is part of our life. All this is completely taken out of the frame. It's almost like watching a Bresson film, or it's what it. Uh, maybe because of that, maybe because of this element of poesy all through the film, we fail to uh, really uh, feel something for Nasir except for the last shot. You know, that is one observation I made. Hello.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, we could hear you. Yeah.
Right. So that was one observation that I wanted to make. In sense, I thought even cinematography was very carefully placed. All the art direction, the color combination, even the color tone of the film, all of it was very carefully placed. So we are very much there. Uh, Rather than a realistic film, we are very much aware of what you're watching. It's very strange because Ibaleo and this film's the cinematography is the same. Yet Ibaleo, I thought we never felt the camera. Right? It was so realistic. This one was not very realistic to me in that sense. We were aware of what we were watching. Although it was brilliant, very um, very beautiful in the sense. So perhaps it's the beauty of the whole film that maybe perhaps the extra attention that we give to the beauty that took away probably the really heinous act at the end of the film. Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, yeah. Parthasarathi, would you
Yeah, that's
agree?
Yeah. I think that
observation.
I mean, as I suggested in the beginning of the discussion, uh, is a kind of there is some kind of disinterestedness attached to the character of Nazir in terms of his religiosity, right? That so that's one of the it comes as a problem in the film in a sense that I was just thinking that that I mean what is that burden of presentation of this figure as Grishma has actually presented. Some people, what people would call as it as a, uh, secular kind of a figure or anything. I was actually reminded of this Kieslowski's film. It's called a short film called Killing. Short film about killing. The argument the film makes is about is that this judicial killing, not judicial killing, what the capital punishment is a film against capital punishment. So in a way, the person who got killed is not so some great person that who got killed. So he is also a cruel man. One who is getting killed by another man is not so nice man. In a way that irrespective of whether you are a nice man or bad man, secular, devout, whatever, the issue should be addressed. Somehow there is the director also kind of burdened with this idea of secularism that comes through the film. That's what is makes him NASIR doing this garlanding the Krishna and those kind of a shots and the other people. So the problem here is that the relationship between communities can be brought in a much more complex way. But these are the very, very, what do you say, the known, in a cliche kind of instances, which are also part of the film. So that's why I was saying that there's a kind of a challenge which the director takes up. On the one hand, he succeeds on some of the registers, and some of the registers is not able to overcome some of the problems already present in this world. So it's a kind of complex. That's what I would say to Grishma. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any other responses? People who have just joined us for this third round. Any other responses?
Sorry, I broke out from the previous meeting. I don't know what Parthasarathi made a point about. But of course, Kieslowski's killing is entirely different from what NASIR addresses. The point is the secular. NASIR is not given to exercise the secular as Kieslowski's killing character is. NASIR performs anything like garlanding or cladding the sari or putting a battu on the head. All the part of his day-to-day work, day-to-day work culture. So that's the mundanity of living of a Muslim and a Hindu and everyone, including that girl who is in that shop. So everybody seems to be coexisting so harmoniously, and that's how it is. And what I'm saying is the last scene, the long shot, is so disturbing because of that particular thing. So Geeta Vishwanathan and Kavya has very rightly talked about the formalism of the film, formalist framework of the film, which I too wanted to go into detail, because he want to establish that existence of a Muslim amongst ourselves is so mundane that we know and we live with them with such a mundanity, that's a banality. The point is, how come the violence erupts? So that is what runs in the background. Tarakeshwar says it's not political, but I want to argue with Tarakeshwar that what is political? Political is what happens, that's a banality of the violence itself is politics. How come that the commonest of the people who coexist can indulge themselves in violence? So the background is painful in the sense that we got to understand that what is in the background, what comes through the sound, we got to know. Any political analyst I got to see has to yet to come out with this answer, why the people who are coexisting erupt into violence. A common man who is living by the neighborhood will kill his neighbor. That psychoanalysis, Sudhir Kakkar has done it, Ashish Nandi and team is doing it. We are still finding a socio-psychoanalysis of why the neighborhood violence occurs. So this film poses that question, psychoanalytical question as to how othering occurs. So this is an important film because it emphasizes on mundanity of the existence of Muslim. As again, Parthasarathi has rightly said, the first scene shows that he's not doing Ajan for 5 times. He may do in the afternoon. Okay. He's a common man who lives among us. So that is secular. Living your day-to-day life is secular, not any other metaphors that you attach to it. So I feel this is an important film because this is a largely not being told, even in the mainstream media, that people who are being killed are the commonest of the people like any other Hindus. We don't know. In the last scene, we get through a lot of jump cuts. Maybe one or two who is working with him may be involved in that. That is the whole point that film makes. I think that should the frame we should take about its politics.
So thank you for the comments, sir. I think we are suggesting that there is a burden of secularism, which also runs along with the film. That it can be a problem. That's what I was suggesting. And I think Tarakeshwar never says it's not a political film. If I get it correctly, he's suggesting that it's a political film in a different way, that it works through the soundscape, through its background music and sound. In a very subtly operative, he's suggesting. That's what I understood what Tarakeshwar was saying.
Yeah. Tarkeshwar would like to come in.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. I think after listening to Paniraj, I just got an idea that the film is trying to showcase the disjuncture between our experiential reality and the discourses which are guiding our action. So there is an experience where we live together, we work together in a secular way, but there is a discourse which is operating on us, which culminates in the death of a man. So the disjuncture between our lived experiences and the discourses which are operating on us, I think that is being showcased through this film.
Yeah, that's the politics. That's what the politics, what we should be talking about. Why I'm saying this again and again is that because having chronicling the violence in coastal districts of Karnataka for around 25 years, I've been seeing that mainstream media is not talking about that. Not any of the mainstream newspapers not talking about, mainstream TV media is not talking about that. Only a smaller voices of activists, the fact-finding teams are talking about this. I mean, this is the whole society, this disjuncture what Tarakeshwar is talking about. Yes, Tarakeshwar, it's a disjuncture. What is that? What is the disjuncture? Where is it? That's the politics. That is means that's a mainstream politics is also a culprit in this. The point is lived experience by the commons and the violence. Where is the othering? That is what I'm saying. Intellectually, we are trying to phantom the other. How the othering is going to happen? How othering is happening? Who is guiding the other? Who is puppeting the others? I mean, that is the whole discussion that film poses on us because I have not read that short story. I would have loved to read that short story by Dilip on which that film is based. But I have been always thinking that in Canada, after 25 or 30 years of communal violence in the coast, I have not come across a short story which narrates this, except few fact-finding narratives, where I find a day-to-day basis, this is the kind of NASIR what I have encountered in my 20 years of fact-finding, right? But not being told in the mainstream. The voice is not on the mainstream, but this has to be told, somehow has to be told, and the film tells it. That's what I'm saying, politics. Tell what is not being told. Talk about disjuncture. That is politics.
So thank you very much. I want to come back to Tarakeshwar. I mean, you're right, that there is I think the framing of the film, I'm also realizing after Rakesh pointed it out, there is this lived experience of one kind, then there is discourses around you. I mean, discourses in the sense, literally like there is some kind of soundscape trying to instruct you how to do things, etc., etc., through some loudspeaker or people speaking around you. So yeah, no, that is true. I was also thinking that how do we think about it? Is it useful to think about this in terms of distinction? Uh, you know, you know, disjuncture, whatever. Is there a separation of that kind? Really, is it possible to think about this relationship as a disjuncture, whatever? Is it possible, or is it always uh, each making each other, like, dialectically? Uh, I mean, there's nothing that there's no meaning outside the discourse. Some of the academicians would say, in a sense that what the film presents as a as a lived experience, mundane, and not paying attention to some of these things, or being okay with certain things, etc., etc. So in a way, I think that's the level of ideology the film works. In a sense, that's where the whole question of secularism and etc. comes into play. Tarakeshwar, what did you?
So, I think I just said the disjuncture is how it is framed in the film. Whether this works in outside of the film, I don't know. If the discourses frame the way we experience things and frame the way we look at experience, but the film is for strategic political reasons, I think, making this disjuncture to make a point. And we got this point because of this disjuncture. So I don't know whether we can use this framework to understand how communalism works outside of the film. That's a different issue.
No, I'm not outside. I'm talking about not outside of the film. I'm saying within the frame, there is this, as you rightly pointed out, there is this presentation of the lived experience of everyday life of NASIR along with other people and the relations. And there is this always you overhear through some other people talking in the background, very much within the frame, or some loudspeaker telling people what to do, what not to do, etc. So this is the tension this film kind of brings in. I'm saying that in a way at the level of ideology, the film seemed to believe in this disjuncture, whereas there is no such possibility of whatever you call it as a lived experience or everyday mundane experience, which is devoid of any discursive ideological registers.
I would say it's a discursive technique of the movie because of this framing device that the film employs. We get the irony and the resultant tragedy. So it is able to affect us precisely because of this.
It's a kind of a strategy, you're saying.
Yeah, it's a narrative strategy, I would say.
Narrative strategy.
I think that's a better narrative strategy than what Nandita Das does in Firak, because that is where I want to hit the psyche of majority Hindus, that looking at the othering, where is the other? Where is the othering, process of the othering? That is what intellectually, thesis by thesis, we are trying to discuss. fact-finding studies we want to unveil, and that's what art is supposed to look for, isn't it? Art is, I mean, art, I don't expect NASIR to give me the answers. NASIR to pose the questions. It is posing the relevant questions that where the othering comes from. Okay, if it is unseen through the sound, it is unseen. Where is it? I mean, that's what it poses to the audience, like last scene in Funry. It poses to the audience that last scene, a long shot, a mute long shot, has the same effect or what Tarkeshwar is talking about, effect. It produces the same effect as last scene in Funry or last scene in Sairat. I mean, that is where we are looking for the politics. That is where the disjuncture has to be looked at, and that is where audience is supposed to think about it. That's where the majority is supposed to think about it. That's where the politics of the film is. The whole, say, it was 78 or 90 and 78 or 80 minutes going through the 4:3 personal, say, as Kavya has rightly said, close up on mid shots, and finally going to a mute long shot is a disjuncture or is an effect which throws like Funry's last scene or Saira's last scene. That's the politics. I think that's where I appreciate NASIR.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah. Also, what is very interesting is that as you people are pointing out, while these discourses are playing out in maybe in the form of loudspeakers or people talking over the phone, it seems like NASIR refuses or at least gives no evident indication to us that he is getting interpellated by these discourses. So while other people seem to somehow absorb these discourses and act upon them, it seems like NASIR is not particularly, he doesn't think this is going to, even when somebody says in the end that the riots have started or whatever, it's the unhurriedness that we see about him, that he doesn't feel afraid, or at least he doesn't exhibit that fear in a visible way to us, as if he's impervious. It's not me, I know everyone here, they can't do this to me. It seems like he is going around. So the subject of this threatened Muslim in the present day Hindutva context is not visible through the character of NASIR, I would think, as presented to us. Yeah.
No, I think precisely because NASIR is innocent of the other kinds of discourses which are available to Muslims, there is a heightened irony and the tragedy. So he gets our sympathy precisely because of that. So it's, I think in that sense, as Parthasarathi says, this movie succeeds in telling the audience to empathize with NASIR.
No, rather than empathizing, Tarkeshwar, rather than saying empathizing, understanding, in the sense that what Kavya says is very much relevant, in the sense that why he is not feeling threatened. That's very interesting question. That is the question I am also asking myself after being chronicling the violences for 20 years. Cases after cases, people are being killed in that kind of atmosphere. They feel safe that neighbors can't do this, but did that. That's an interesting thing. I mean, one study by Sudhir Kakkar in Hyderabad has chronicled that psychology of how feeling of safeness, feeling of othering comes. That's a larger issue. But within that framework, so why I am talking about this so intensely is, well, knowing in a coastal region, the kind of violence and the kind of experiences the victims are feeling, because they are not threatened by their neighbors. They think that neighbors can't do it. And even now, they say that who perpetrates the violence is others from the outside. So which is outside, which is inside is a very relevant question. I think we are running out of time. Others need to talk. I hope I should.
Yeah, I have a point to add to that. It's not as if he's not threatened by it. In fact, I mean, if not directly threatened by it, it's very uncomfortable in that particular scene where the owner of the shop is speaking about Muslims and how they need to be stoned. One particular scene I remember where he's on his phone talking to someone else, and he clearly is very uncomfortable. The expression on his face is, he doesn't really express it, nor does he think that this is going to affect him as such, being a Muslim. But then there is definitely some discomfort I feel in that particular scene, at least.
Also, it seems like others identify somebody as Muslim in our context, whereas one's own self-description need not necessarily be something that one sees oneself as. So he himself, that may not be the primary identity that he subscribes to, whereas to the rioters, he is a Muslim, beginning and end. Whereas to himself, maybe that's not even the identity that he sees himself subscribing to. I wonder, I'm not sure, I wonder. Yeah, any other responses? Anything else anyone would like to add? Okay, if there are no other responses,
Okay.
Sir Paniraj, sir?
I want to add my last lines here.
Yes, sure,
I mean,
sure.
like, why I like this film is I was waiting for this film to come because somebody to tell to the larger audience that you see this violence is banal, violence, the othering is masked. We are not able to understand from where the othering is coming, and it is the responsibility of the majority community to understand this. So this film particularly, especially in a line of films, including what Parthi said, Mumbai Meri Jaan, Firak, etc., Bajrang Bhaijaan, etc., where this film stands out is that telling the story of mundane and the mundanity of violence and banality of violence. That's why it's a welcome film in all the art forms, including short stories and dramas that has been written on communal violence. This is a welcome addition to the artistic expression on communalism. That's what I want to add.
If there are no more comments to be made, I'll take this opportunity to thank Parthasarathi, who readily agreed when I asked him if he would join our Zoom discussion. Thank you very much, Parthasarathi.
Thank you,
Paniraj,
Nitya.
sir, it was very important to have you for this discussion, sir. I am not personally acquainted with you. I had sent this link to Shashikant, and he informed me that you would be joining us. It's been very, very interesting and important to have you for our discussion today, sir. And all the talking online, talking about films online group members, Facebook group members. Great to have you all. So we'll meet again like this one more night with another film which we will be discussing. Thank you again. I will indicate the date and time for our next meeting. In the meanwhile, any suggestions about the next film to discuss, please post it on the Facebook group. Thank you all once again for joining us, and a good night. Have a very good night. Thank you.